Okay, I'll call the meeting to order. And we recognize that we meet on the traditional territory of the LHTAKO DENE Nation. With respect to the agenda, you just have some late attachments. You'll see the late attachment that you have in front of you on the screen there for the wildfire presentation. And then the short report for K8, the Quesnel Bike Park scope change. With that in mind, can I have a motion to approve the agenda? Councillor Elliott so moved. Councillor Vic second. Questions or comments on the agenda? All in favor? Any opposed? Carried. And we do have two separate meeting minutes. Regular council meeting of May 10th, a motion to adopt. Councillor Goulet so moved. Councillor Runge second. Questions or comments on the minutes? All those in favor? Any opposed? Carried. And the public hearing minutes of May 3rd. Motion to adopt. Councillor Roodenburg, Councillor Vic second. All in favor? Any opposed? Carried. All right, we have a delegation tonight, Matt, so come on up. And come right up to this front piece here. Yep, and you can take a seat and yeah, there you go. So if you can pull the mic, yeah, close to you. All right, how's that sound? Perfect. So if you introduce yourself, then the floor is yours.
Perfect. Well, thank you for having me today. I'm Matt Lees. I work for BC Wildfire out of the Cariboo Fire Center. And just quickly, my job role is based on the fuel management activities that occur and a bit of the prescribed fire, but focusing on the fire behavior objectives of some of these fuel treatments. My job is heavily relied on prioritizing the funding and where it is located in our region. So that would be 100 Mile area, DCC, all the way out to Anaheim Lake, as well as the areas around Quesnel, out to Nasco and out to Barkerville kind of area. One of the things we've had issues with, and please stop me at any time if anyone has any questions, one of the issues we've had with some of the prioritization, as well as just knowing what work has been completed, is the actual mapping of the shapefiles. Everything has been, and I'll try not to use too many acronyms, but everything has been entered into results. So like has been, once the activity has happened on the land base, it has been put into results so that we can find it. The issue is we have not had the right coding to find some of these treatments. So what we have tried here in the Cariboo is basically started this mapping project using Foresight as a contractor. To start gathering that data from our program from the past, all the way back to 2008, 2007 kind of range, as well as the new wildfire risk reduction funding, which we're currently in, as well as the First Nation funding, some of the forced employment program funding, anything that has a risk reduction lens on it, we have used, we've kind of gathered it on this map. So one of the things is this is, so I guess just one of the disclaimers is this is the public version. We do have an external, an internal version, but that version has a little bit more like 5 to 10 years out. But it's very, we're not 100% sure what's going to occur that far out just with the funding allotments. So this plan here is showing 3 years out. In some cases, it's realistically too much ground for us in the next 3 years. It's probably showing more like 5 to 7 years. So it's quite a bit of area. So I apologize. I brought some paper maps. I know that this one isn't the greatest because it is such a large scale. It looks good on like a 3x4 map. But basically we're going to have this one. And next week we're going to have it broken into also smaller sections, so that we are able to, if you're worried about the Quesnel, like the city itself, you can bring up that map. If you're worried about more like Wells, you can bring up that map. So basically, it's about 90. We've worked with the zone here, and he apologizes he couldn't be here tonight, but. We're about 95% there with all the shape files, and I'm sure we're going to continue to find stuff, but we just wanted to get this out there and have a starting point. So I wasn't going to get, unless someone really wants to know, I wasn't going to get really into the funding and like the actual prioritization that I go through, but I just wanted to bring this forward with you and see what anyone's thoughts are.
Great. Thank you, Matt. Just for clarification, results is the government's system for capturing all this data.
Correct.
Reference results?
I almost did. Good. I think that was the only acronym I used.
Yeah,
so.
no, it's all good.
Okay,
and then with respect to how this faces to the public, where does the public go to access this information or do the drill down that you're suggesting that is possible?
Yeah, so I think that's our next step. So I'll be working with Aaron, probably with the city, to decide where that should be posted, if that should be on the city's website. Just so you guys know, this is the most up-to-date version. I gave back about 3 or 4 suggestions, and we should be getting the final copy by the end of this week, and then we'll decide where we want to put it, and then you guys can also decide. But we were in Williams Lake, we're putting it on the City of Williams Lake website for a starting point, kind of where their CWPP is, or their Community Wildfire Protection Plan is located.
Great, thank you. Questions or comments from council? Okay. Manager Robinson, did you want to add any comments or about the utility of the tool or anything?
Yeah, so thank you, Mayor. I invited Matt here to give this presentation because I see this as a really great way for us to visually represent to the public all of the great work we've done over the last few years, a forward-looking kind of tactical planning for future years, and then it can also record maintenance treatments over time. So all of this is a really useful tool, and yeah, thank you.
Thank you. So, Matt, I think because Aaron and I have been involved with this a little bit, I think that future piece is going to be something that's important to communicate, that time horizon that you're working on. We've had some discussions, for example, with the bike club, because, of course, we've got a fuel treatment in the Wonderland area, and if they start to get nervous about what might happen in that area, people with viewscapes, Dragon Mountain or Milburn Mountain, et cetera. So somehow as this gets communicated, if it gets parsed out that, you know, already done, and people can actually go look at what it looks like when it's done as a reference point for coming to you.
Yeah.
What would be the articulation with where if they see something that's a future scope, what's the articulation then with any potential public consultation? How will those two articulate so people are pointed to process to give any feedback or input on a future treatment? So
yeah, and just to confirm, like you're talking about like if they see an area of risk that they want to bring forward?
Or if they see that you've got on the map that in year 2 or year 3, there's an area that they're particularly interested in is going to have a treatment on it.
Yeah.
How does it point them to, you know, what's the process for them to be involved? But I like even how you framed it. If they think there's a particularly bad area, you know, where can this tool point them to the right person to talk to?
I think so, and I think that's what we would do. And if the city has someone that is kind of the lead, like if it's Aaron or, and I think with these maps, there will also be my contact information. So people can always reach out to me. And the issue I have, or the worry I have is just with having so much plan stuff on there, is we're going to start getting a lot of questions on when is this going to happen. And unfortunately, it's based off of funding. So I think we're just going to have to make sure we have a contact in place and have those conversations. When it comes to the actual consultation of the actual projects, I think that'd be more at the prescription level. But that doesn't mean we can't have consultation beforehand also.
Yeah, good. Thank you. Anything else from council members? No. Thank you, Matt. We look forward to that. And Aaron, Councillor Paul, sorry, my mistake.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. A couple of questions. I spent quite a bit of time out in the bush, mainly on a recreational basis, and I noticed a lot of burn piles and a lot of log sorts, reload areas. Is special attention being paid to those particular locations? Because I see them as being somewhat vulnerable.
And so you're talking about like reloads for like logging operations?
That's right.
I would say that we work with all of the industries, so like West Fraser's, Tokos, those, but when it comes to our areas of interest, it's mostly based off of density of structures. So I guess it's something that we can take into consideration if it's a heavily used area for, say, reloads, and it's going to be continually used in the future, and it's a potential fire source, we could take that in consideration. But for the most part, our prioritization's only been based off of density of structures at this point.
Okay, anything else? Seeing none, thank you, Matt. And we'll look forward to this tool evolving.
Yeah, no, and thank you for having me. And yeah, anyone can reach out to me if they have any questions afterwards also.
Where's home base for you? I'm
based out of Williams Lake. And then just for a quick one I'll throw out is we are hiring another wildfire prevention officer, so my position. So we are trying to ramp up at the fire center level because it is a large area that I have to travel. So we're hoping here in the near future that I'll have 2 zones, most likely Williams Lake and Chilcotin, because that's where I used to do most of my firefighting, and then someone will have Quesnel and 100 Mile, and it'll just be more person to person in the future.
So hopefully they'll be out with our crew at Blackwater there.
Yeah,
great.
But it'd be me for quite a bit here until we get the prescribed fire program. That's going to be their main focus, getting that up and running.
Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, everyone.
Okay. Next item of business is just an item coming out of special close for public consideration, and that's the motion council passed in special close to approve $300,000 for the LHTAKO DENE cultural interpretation project. And procedurally, this is just information. We've already voted, so it's an information only for council, correct? Yeah, thank you. Okay. Moving on then to I-1, Policy and Bylaw Committee Chair Summary, Councillor Runge.
We're just flying through this. Anyway, thank you. So the purpose of this report, of course, is to inform Council of what was discussed many moons ago on May 10th at our Policy and Bylaw Committee meeting. So we talked about a few things. The first one that we talked about was the webcasting retention. So we had a discussion with regards to, how long do we keep our videos of city, on our city YouTube channel. And so we agreed because, they'll be removed from, that we would just keep them on there right now until, there's no cost associated or limited costs associated with it, so they'll be there. And we'll continue to look at what other municipalities' policies and procedures are with regards to trends going forward. The second thing that we talked about was a strata conversion policy, and this was a policy that somehow had, missed a review many moons ago. Also, it was a 2007 strata conversion policy taking into account the current, and so the reason that we were looking at is because we were looking at our current relevance and our housing stock here, and with regards to what is required if someone wants to convert a strata into a rental or a rental into a strata. So the committee asked staff to update and revise a policy to encourage investments and consideration to current tenants while still maintaining a satisfactory rental stock in the community. The policy will also be revised to reflect current policy naming conventions because the policy, its name is outdated. And then we also looked at our parks plan, and the policy committee reviewed the parks plan and determined that the objectives listed in that plan required further clarifications on park classifications, the descriptions, and the park uses. The committee requested staff review the parameters of city, community, and neighborhood parks, and to revisit the parks plan possibly as a future strategic planning exercise with the next elected council. We discussed current usages, considered some of the current and future usages, but really decided this would definitely be something that needed further discussion. And while we were there, we also found that as the park's mandates and future uses get reviewed, clarified, and shared with regards to event hosting, sports, trails, RV parks, and other new and updated amenities, that it will be necessary to consider all parks through multiple lenses, with regards to usage, budgets, maintenance, cross-purpose usages, user groups, and proactive community engagement and traffic flows. So that's going to be something that will be looked at I'm believing in the future sometime in the fall plus. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Runge. Any questions or comments for the chair of the policy committee? Seeing none, thank you. Quick update from me from the Public Safety and Policing Committee. You'll see that the committee met and reviewed the outcomes from our discussions with Ministers Eby and Farnworth, particularly around prolific offenders, and you'll see in the report some of the actions that we're going to be following up on. I think the big thing for us is to start looking at being more interventionist in the court decisions, particularly around criminal behavior. So these are prolific offenders who are active criminals. We're not talking about individuals who have one-off mental health or addictions issue. But even on the mental health and addictions issue, you'll see on the fourth bullet down that we want to do some work around, the fifth, fourth bullet down, take a look at the participation in more restorative justice and in that integrated justice system as well. So I had brief counsel about this prior to us having the PSP, so none of this should be news for council. Any questions or comments on my report? Seeing none, I'll move then to the Cariboo Joint Advisory Committee meeting.
Thank you. So meeting was held last month, and out of the meeting, 2 recommendations have been asked to be brought forward to council. First one is that the North Cariboo Joint Advisory Committee recommend to the Quesnel City Council that the city allocate a total of $100,000 of COVID-19 Safe Restart funds to the North Cariboo Recreation and Park Service to offset lost revenue in 2021 as a result of COVID-19. Need to move her in a second.
Yeah, so you can move.
I wasn't there.
Oh, well, it doesn't matter. You're moving it in
sorry.
council,
I'll
right?
move that then.
Yeah, if you move it. Seconder for that, Councillor Vic. Any questions or comments on this? Councillor Paul.
Thank you. Could I just get some clarification? I understand that the regional district is also contributing.
Correct.
Likewise?
Yeah, we're match.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Okay, any further questions or comments on that? So on the motion, all in favor? Any opposed? That motion carried unanimously. The second one?
Second resolution is that the North Cariboo Joint Advisory Committee recommend to Quesnel City Council a resolution of support for the Alex Fraser Park Society to an aid and grant application for amenities for the Agricultural Centre. Also moved.
Okay, seconder, Councillor Elliott seconds. Questions or comments on this one? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried unanimously. Thank you, Councillor Roodenburg. Okay, on to staff reports. Manager Robinson, Forestry Initiatives update.
Thank you, Mayor. So the purpose of this report is to update Council on the Quesnel and surrounding area Community Wildfire Protection Plan, the progress to date, and the next steps for 2022 and beyond. This report is for information purposes only. Since the Community Wildfire Protection Plan, or CWPP for short, was published in 2018, the city has completed fuel management on 227 hectares. And what we mean when we say treatments are hand crew work to thin, space, and prune trees, as well as mechanical harvesting, and then piling, chipping, and burning the remaining debris. We currently have another 200 hectares of shelf-ready prescriptions. Sites for treatment this fall include Durrell Road, so that's the Dragon Mountain Road corridor to the park, Dragon Bluff, which is also known as Flying Monkeys Trail System, and we'll also be completing the hand treatment and pile and burning at Pinnacles Provincial Park. To help us track and continue and move forward strategically, this fall, Mike Simpson and I, who are co-authors of the CWPP, will be facilitating a session between West Fraser, BC Timber Sales, BC Parks, Ministry of Forests, and possibly some other tenure holders. This meeting will allow us to track what our project partners have done towards fuel management, and it will also give us a chance to discuss maintenance of the treated areas. It's important to note that the proposed community forest will allow for many other opportunities for fuel management as part of the CWPP, so the polygons that fall within the community forest footprint, and then also adjacent areas. Lastly, I'd like to point out that all of our wildfire protection work is made possible through funding from Forest Enhancement Society BC, the Community Resilience Investment Program, the Forest Employment Program, and the new Wildfire Risk Reduction Provincial Program. Thank you.
Great. Questions or comments on this report? Just a couple of comments from me. One of the funds that Manager Robinson referred to, CRIP, or the Community Resiliency, is going to multi-year funding. So they are switching that, which is great. We asked that when they repurposed that program. We asked them to make it possible for multi-year funding because it gives us consistency when you're doing this kind of work because of how it flows. There's no point going in and doing the prescription if you can't get the money for the treatment, because it will time out. The prescription can time out on you depending on how long the gap is. So that's good news. In the dialogue that I'm having with the Ministry of Forest, including up to the Minister, we just had a conference call with the Minister, and the former Minister, Doug Donaldson, is doing some work, some research work around this, and Manager Robinson pointed it out in the dialogue that she'll have with licensees and tenure holders this fall, is that right now the funding is only for the initial treatment. But these areas need to be maintained. There's no point in going in and doing an initial treatment and then having them all come back as conifer stands that just infill and create the same fire risk that you went in and spent a lot of money to get out of the area. So we're having quite a bit of conversation, and it may be where the federal government can come in and use some of their funds on the ongoing treatments and maintenance of these sites. And then the other conversation we're having is the province changing its thinking about deciduous, because with a lot of these, especially large fire breaks that we're creating, you really want to have them infill with deciduous, but a lot of the prescriptions that we've got, because they're still not really fuel management prescriptions, they're forestry prescriptions, don't allow us to actually do a switch out of species and have deciduous come in. So now that we've got the kind of experience on the front end of doing the treatments, we're learning what we need to have happen on the back end in terms of long-term management of these same stands. So it's an ongoing conversation with the province right now. Okay. Anything else on this topic? Okay, thank you, Manager Robinson. Next one, the Canada Community Building Strategic Priorities Fund. Director Thomas, I guess it'll be Director Coben, or Director, some director in the room, please present this report.
So the purpose of this report is to seek Council's approval to apply for a grant to the Strategic Priorities Fund under the Capacity Building Stream for environmental controls and asset planning at the landfill. So each municipality is able to apply for 2 grants under the Canada Community Building Fund Strategic Priorities Fund program. We, of course, are going to apply for the Johnson Bridge under the capital one, and we can apply for another one under the capacity building. There is no stated maximum for the capacity building stream, but past project approvals have averaged around 100,000, and in the past we have seen several communities receive both grants during the programs and previous grant intakes. So the city continues to work through the issues brought to light during the strategic planning process for the landfill in 2019. More planning work is required in the areas of methane management, leachate management, surface water management, and operations and material management. So these are long-range plans and asset plans. So the landfill is a regional asset and has felt this type of work fits the capacity building stream of this grant program. So the recommendation is that Council approves submitting a grant application for $100,000 for environmental controls and asset planning at the landfill to the capacity building stream of the Strategic Priorities Fund through the Canada Community Building Fund in British Columbia.
Councillor Elliott, so moved. Councillor Roodenburg, second. Questions or comments for Director Bolton? Councillor Vic.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question might be more for Director Thomas, but I'll give it a shot anyways. With the the assessment for the migration, the gas migration, at the beginning of this term of council, we kind of floated a dream that maybe there'd be an opportunity to capture some of that gas and use it for practical purposes, like heating public works or any other nearby buildings. As part of that investigation in this grant, will that be explored, or is it simply a matter of dealing with it in an environmental context.
So we definitely have talked about that a variety of times, but the challenge is we just don't have the economies of scale. We, at this point, just don't produce enough to make it worthwhile to do anything with it. We're just not, or we don't have enough methane, which we don't, of course, want, right? But absolutely, when we're doing all this stuff, we're exploring all the latest best practices to see what options we have out there.
Yeah, and one of the things that's happening provincially is that Fortis has a bigger mandate for what they call renewable natural gas, which is all these gas capture situations. And so as their program expands and as they get better with the technologies, scrubbing and cleaning and making sure that it's actually a clean combustible fuel, then we'll, potentially keep an eye on that as well, right? But right now, it's, as Director Bolton pointed out, it's just the numbers just aren't there. Okay. Any other questions or comments on this? Okay. So on the motion, all those in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Okay, next, BC Transit Annual Operating Agreement. Director Norburn.
Thank you. The purpose of this report is to obtain council approval to enter into the 2022-2023 Annual Operating Agreement with BC Transit for the provision of conventional and custom service. The city has a transit service agreement, or a TSA, with BC Transit that provides the basis for transit services in Quesnel. Each year, the city and BC Transit enter into an annual operating agreement that confirms the annual budget, service levels, and cost structure of the transit system. A change that was made last year is BC Transit is now billing local government partners based on actual expenditures rather than based on the budget. The city has $63,633 in a local transit fund held by BC Transit, essentially our surplus, which is a combination of the remaining Safe Restart funding and any overages for when BC Transit was billing based on the budget prior to the change to based on expenditures. This funding can be applied to the city's share of transit costs at any time at the request of the city. Under the terms of the Safe Restart Funding Contribution Agreement, BC Transit and its local government partners are required to maintain targeted essential transit service levels and fees through to the end of the 2023-2024 fiscal year. The total cost of conventional and custom transit service over the year in question is $1,164,983. The estimated net municipal share for the service under this agreement is $513,647, although the actual net municipal cost will vary depending on what the actual costs and revenues are. Funding for this has been included in the city's operating budget. The recommendation is that council approves entering into the 2022-23 annual operating agreement for Quesnel Transit Service with BC Transit, and that the mayor and corporate administrator be authorized to execute such documentation as required to complete the agreement.
Okay, on the motion, can I have a mover and seconder? Councillor Runge, seconded Councillor Vic. Any questions or comments? Councillor Paul.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. On page 29 of 56, it is noted that, as usual, the travel to NASCO for all passengers is free. I'd like to ask, how is that funded?
That's funded by the NASCO band. So the service that's provided to the community of Wells and to the NASCO band is basically based on a cost recovery basis, and those communities pay for the transit, and then people either go for free or the revenue collected is kept by that community.
Thank you.
Councillor Runge.
Yes, thank you. So I guess I'm looking for a little clarification with regards to the actual costs will vary depending on the actual costs and revenue. Given the, I'll call them major increases in fuel prices, our revenue will most likely stay the same, but our costs will be way up. So my question is, do we have any kind of estimates of how that will play off for our city portion of that? Because, that 513, could that balloon to a different amount?
I think the intent is that, and our experience with BC Transit is that we're typically well under what we budgeted. So they anticipate fuel expenditures. So we, that's why we have a surplus, is because we have typically, well, on our end, we have a surplus as well as on their end, they have a surplus. So we feel pretty comfortable with where we're at, but certainly rising fuel costs are a concern to everybody, but it is something that BC Transit has factored into their cost estimates.
Yeah, it's to stop a bit of fuzzy budgeting on the part of BC Transit, where if you can imagine how many communities they're serving, if they're all doing it on the basis of budget, most costs are under budget, then they've got these pockets of money sitting all over the place that are actually not deployed then because they're surplus from the year before. So they're just trying to get to real-time costs I think given the room we've got just now, there may be a rationalization around fuel, but that'll go up and down depending on what's happening with fuel in any given year or quarter.
Yeah, I guess for me it was just clarification with regards to, do we have to worry in our budget with regards to fuel costs for our transit, or is that generally covered by, by BC Transit? I guess that's really, where my question was going to.
Yeah, I mean, it's a shared revenue or a shared expenditure relationship. So BC Transit pays for a little over 50% of the cost of transit service. I mean, we take their word for it. They know what they're doing. They know how many kilometers they're using. They have factored in sort of fuel expenditures, and that's built into the budget that, is presented here today. We've never had an experience where we've been, having to make up lost expenditures. We've always been in a situation where we've over budgeted and we've had surplus, and we have a surplus now in our transit function. Plus, we have this surplus of $60,000+ that BC Transit is holding for us. So we feel pretty comfortable with where we're at, but it's something we'll have to monitor going forward. And the switch was done as a result of consultation with the local government partners. So BC Transit consulted with the local government partners. Couldn't be a situation where some communities did it one way and others did it another way, but the vast majority of communities wanted to switch to that system where we're paying for the actual costs. And like I say, one of the concerns is that there's just a lot of money sitting in these surplus accounts that, has been taxed for but isn't being applied towards the service. So.
But the short answer to your question, fuel is a vulnerability. But right now, because we're in a surplus situation, we've got a bit of a buffer. Just a couple of quick points on this with respect. We've got the motion with respect to the operating agreement, but with respect to a kind of an interim review of BC Transit, where are we at with the possibility of having them take a look at some special circumstances we've got, particularly vis-a-vis South Quesnel, because we have the two areas that we've been informed as a council, one around food security, people being able to access where the less expensive food is, and then the other workers moving around. And I've talked to all of the major employers up in South Quesnel, and they're really getting pinched just now with people not being available on particularly Saturday and Sunday when transit's not running. So they have to change their shift arrangement because people are depending on the bus to get to and from work. So what is our ability to do a bit of an interim reset and take a look at an expanded service if possible?
So I have talked to BC Transit about that. They have indicated that this year they do plan to have somebody come to the community planning, from their planning department and do exactly what you said, a sort of an overlook of our services. And I have highlighted to them sort of the issues related to South Quesnel. They haven't given us any firm dates of when that's happening, but they have assured us that it's planned for this fiscal year.
Great, thank you. And the South Quesnel Business Association has done a survey of employers, so they'll have some pretty good information around timing and what might work, so that would be great. Thank you. So on the agreement, any further comments or questions? On the motion then to sign the agreement, all in favor? Any opposed? That carried unanimously. Thank you, Director Norburn. Director Turner, the Wee Rd Variance.
Thank you, Mayor. The subject of this report is a development variance permit review for 105 Wee Road for changes to the accessory buildings number and structure regulations. The development variance permit application will vary the number of accessory buildings. In the CR2 zone, 2 are permitted. The request is for 3. It will also vary the front lot setback to 1.5 meters. I want to make a note in the map here. The wrong property is showing on the map, and I left that in for educational purposes. The notice was corrected and delivered properly. There's only 4 houses that were notified, and they were delivered a proper notice, just to clarify that. Most people admittedly did not recognize. But the property is 105 Wee Road, just for clarification. The property owner is planning an additional building. It is for a new boat and RV garage, as shown on the plan. You'll see a number of buildings, 3 already existing buildings. One of those buildings will be removed, so in the end, there will be 3 accessory buildings. Due to lot constraints, a number of lot constraints, the building is required to be at 1.5 meters from the lot line. We have received no objections, and even through our hand delivery notices, to the to this requested variance, to either of these requested variances to date. We will be recommending that council vary the sections of the zoning bylaw 1880-2019 for Lot 2, District Lot 6677, Cariboo District, Plan 5861, 105 Wee Road, and we'll be varying Section 4.8.2 to permit a total of 3 accessory buildings on the property, and also varying Section 4.8.10 to permit a front lot setback of 1.5 meters.
So on the recommendation, Councillor Elliott so moved, Councillor Goulet second. Any questions or comments on this? Councillor Runge.
Thank you. So, looks great. I just have one question. On Wee Road, do we clear the snow on that road? And my question comes from this point, because if it's 1.5 meters, that's what, 5 feet? Do we have enough room to put the snow where that building is going to go, I guess, is my question.
Thank you. All of these are referred to internally to staff, and of course, I'm not a snow clearer, but I'm looking at Chris, who probably has a little bit more knowledge, who's giving a big head nod there. And so, yeah, and it would have been referred to the Director of Capital Works as well.
Anything else, Councillor Paul?
Yeah, thank you to staff. On studying the actual layout of the lot, it appears that, and it's really hard to read, but the existing house is really faintly outlined. Is that true? Is that the existing house that is faintly outlined?
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, that did not transfer very well into the agenda. It is clear on our documents, but yes, the faintly outlined is the house. Correct.
Okay, anything else? Okay, on the motion, all those in favor? Any opposed? That motion carried unanimously. Thank you. Next, back to Director Norburn, pickleball and tennis court lighting.
Thank you. The purpose of this report is to obtain council approval to reallocate funds previously budgeted for the replacement of the men's baseball diamond backstop to install lighting on the pickleball and tennis courts in West Fraser Timber Park. In March of 2022, the Pickleball Club contacted city staff advising that they had successfully obtained a $10,000 grant that they could contribute towards the lighting of a portion of the pickleball courts in the West Fraser Timber Park. The club requested permission to install lights for 2 of the 6 pickleball courts. The club indicated that they had sufficient funding between the grant, their own funds, and donations in kind that they hoped to obtain to complete the project without financial assistance from the city. The club's request was presented to the Executive Committee on its meeting on April 13th. The committee was supportive of the project and expressed an interest in exploring the option of expanding the scope of work to include lighting for all 6 of the pickleball courts and both tennis courts. Staff were directed to work with the club to provide an estimated cost to light all of the courts. The estimated cost to undertake the full project is $90,000. The Executive Committee was provided with this estimated cost at their May 25th meeting, and the committee discussed options to fund the full project. The Pickleball Club has secured $10,000, and the club also has an additional $3,000 in cash they are prepared to contribute towards the project, resulting in an estimated cost to the city of $77,000 should the city decide to proceed with the project. The committee was further advised that the Public Works Department would not be proceeding in 2022 with the backstop replacement project for the men's baseball diamond in West Fraser Timber Park, indicating that it would be better to wait for the results of the ball field review, which is currently underway. The backstop replacement project has been included in the 2022 capital budget with an approved budget of $100,000, 70% of which is allocated to come from gas tax funds. At its meeting on May 25th, the Executive Committee passed the following resolution: that the Executive Committee recommends to Council to include the lighting of the Quesnel Pickleball and Tennis Courts project in the capital plan for the current year, with funds redirected from the deferred backstop project and the Pickleball Club. And the recommendation is that Council approves the funding. The West Fraser Timber Park Pickleball and Tennis Court lighting project is part of the 2022 capital plan, based on a financial contribution of $13,000 from the Quesnel Pickleball Club, with the balance of funding coming from the reallocation of funds in the capital plan from the deferred baseball diamond backstop project.
Okay, on the report or motion, Councillor Roodenburg, Councillor Vic, moving and seconding, I'm taking it. Okay, questions or comments? Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to be voting in favor of this project, but I just wanted to mention that I think it's extremely positive that the club itself took the initiative to move this forward. It's reminiscent of a few years ago with all the youth that were involved in the skateboard park and wanted to move it forward as well. They put in the hard work, and then we do what we can to help if it's a good project, so kudos to them.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from council? Just a quick question in terms of timing, because I know once we approve this, people want the courts lit. Unfortunately, I believe we've got some supply chain issues with this, particularly with respect to the stands. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes. There are supply chain issues that, we hope that they'll be resolved as quickly as possible, but like you say, it's not going to happen tomorrow.
Yeah, so upon approval of this, and notwithstanding the supply chain issues, the lighting project can proceed, and then we just have to exercise a little bit of patience. So any further questions or comments? All those in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Okay. Thank you. And I know some members are here, so thank you to Councillor Elliott's point for that. So, okay. All right. Moving on then, the Rolph Street floodplain.
Thank you, Mayor. The subject of this report is to review the overall site design for a new single detached home on a vacant lot on Rolph Street, located within the floodplain and riparian area. There are no variances being requested. And take you into some background for information, the proposed dwelling is required to be set back 30 meters from the high water mark, and the habitable area and mechanical space is required to be elevated to a minimum of 473 meters above sea level. The survey shows the high water mark, and it is required that lower system be elevated to the elevations noted. The riparian area will remain undeveloped in a natural vegetation, and we're also requesting that some vegetation be replanted along that area, as it was removed by a previous owner. The owner will also be requested to install a 2-foot-high retaining, or is also planning on installing a 2-foot-high retaining wall on either side of the lot to ensure runoff and soils remain on the said lot, so as to not affect neighboring properties. With respect to the floodplain, a covenant was registered in 1979 on the property. At the time of the subdivision, to specify elevation and setback requirements. With our updated floodplain mapping, this elevation has been increased a bit, and we are utilizing the new floodplain elevation is the point of this note. The city has obtained, has required that the surveyor mark and ensure that those elevations are done at the time of building inspection prior to final occupation of the building. With regards to the sensitive area ecosystem, this lot does intersect that area. However, all of the development will be outside of the 30-meter buffer, and thus a riparian assessment is not required. However, the zoning bylaw stipulates that the 15-meter area must be maintained. Again, there's no vegetation. We are asking that this additional vegetation is placed back just to the point of the requirements in the zoning bylaw. This does also help erosion, and is to the benefit of the property owner. We are also requesting some silt fencing that will be required across the property during construction. The recommendation is that council approve DP 2022-43 for the construction of a new single detached dwelling on Lot 1, District Lot 704, Cariboo District Plan PGP 47945, with a setback 30 meters from the high water mark and an elevation of 473 meters, subject to a site drainage, all site drainage on the property being retained on the property, installing a silt fencing along the rear property to avoid sedimentation of the river during construction, reestablishing vegetation in the riparian area to improve habitat, bank stability, and runoff filtration, and updating the floodplain covenant on the property to specify the new required elevation and conditions of development prior to occupation of the building.
Thank you. On the recommendation? Sure. Councillor Elliott, so moved. Councillor Vic, second. Questions or comments? Is this the last remaining undeveloped lot in there for sure?
On that side of the road, yes.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, anything else? All in favor of the recommendation? Any opposed? That motion has carried unanimously. Okay, Dragon Hill Reservoir, Director Coben.
Thank you, Mayor. The purpose is to receive council approval to assign the contract to construct a new reservoir with including mechanical works and electric controls to replace the Dragon Hill Reservoir. This reservoir is in poor condition. It's designated for replacement, and this project, it's been in the 5-year capital plan for a number of years, and it is in the 2022 capital budget. The work in this contract are for supply and install of the reservoir fencing, all associated piping and controls, and this new reservoir will improve water temperature and turnover mixing and improve water quality. In addition to this, fire flows and water pressure to Sword Road, Carson Pit Road, and North Star will also be improved. 4 bids were received for this project, ranging from $1.573 million to $1.88 million. And Canadian Western Mechanical was the low bidder, with meeting all of the submission requirements. The existing reservoir will remain in service until the new build is complete, expected to be June 2023. The recommendation is that Quesnel City Council direct staff to award the contract for the Dragon Hill Reservoir replacement to Canadian Western Mechanical Limited in the amount of $1,573,115 plus GST, with funding coming from water reserves.
On the recommendation, Councillor Runge by nod. Councillor Vic, second. Questions or comments? Councillor Paul.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To staff, how long was it since we built or rebuilt the Dragon Hill Reservoir? It doesn't seem like it's been there for really a long time.
Yeah, it's approaching 40 years old. So the concrete, it's showing signs of spalling, leakage. So we did a reservoir assessment, complete reservoir assessment project back in approximately 2012, and it was identified then that it was in poor condition. So this will be the second reservoir we've replaced within the last 5 years. Prior to that, it was the Pinecrest replacement back in 2017.
Yeah, and I just want to remind council, when we get these forward, they're awkward. We don't go back and revisit the decision to include this in the capital plan. So those questions were all asked. This is just simply a decision to award the contract, not to revisit the decision or the rationale. Councillor Elliott.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So just a question on the just for my knowledge here, on to improve the water temperature. So that's so you're not going to get your turnover when you, maybe just explain that to me, please.
Yeah, so with this reservoir, the water quality temperature has improved since the bulk water station was installed, just due to the fact that in the real cold winter months, there wasn't a lot of usage on that particular area. So this reservoir is size slightly smaller, and it's got a mixing equipment inside the reservoir, so it's not, it's mechanically controlled. There's very little maintenance, so the mixing will help with water quality. So it's less maintenance overall at the end of the day.
Okay, so on the award of the contract to Canadian Western Mechanical, Councillor Runge. So we've already got the motion, right? So I'm going to take the vote now. Okay, so all those in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Thank you. Okay, next, the Quesnel Bike Park scope change, and that's one of your late attachments. And congratulations are in order to our coordinator, Blair, for elevated responsibilities. Either congratulations or commiserations. So go ahead and lead as in this report.
Thank you. The purpose of this report is to update Council on a scope change for the paved pump track at the Quesnel Bike Park and to request additional funding for this change. When initially planning for this project, it was assumed the paved pump track would be a beginner track similar to the one in South Hills. After discussions with contractors and community members, it was determined that an intermediate advanced pump track would be of more benefit to the community instead of adding a redundancy in amenities. The South Hills track is already successfully capturing the beginner and intermediate riders. A value-added paved pump track will be more of an economic driver by providing opportunity to host larger events and races, and by adding an amenity that will encourage people from out of area to visit or lengthen their stay. There is no similar pump track within at least 300-kilometer radius, and an intermediate advanced track will cater to a larger demographic of riders and highlight Quesnel Bike Park as a destination in and of itself. The uniqueness of the rubberized rider park beside the progressive paved pump track offers a special combination that entire families can enjoy and advance their skills on. The intermediate advanced pump track will be designed to still be enjoyed by beginner riders while offering progressive consistency that will appeal to every skill level. With the development of 3 key mountain bike areas, Dragon Mountain, Wonderland, and Quesnel Bike Park, Quesnel is already becoming a riding destination, and this facility will add greatly to that. The recommendation is that Quesnel City Council approve the allocation of $95,000 from gas tax reserves for the scope change to the Quesnel Bike Park to include an intermediate advanced paved pump track.
Okay, on the recommendation, Councillor Elliott so moved. Seconder for the recommendation. Councillor Vic. Okay, questions or comments? Councillor Vic.
Just a small detail, thank you, Mr. Mayor. With the drawdown of $95,000 from gas tax, how is our reserve looking?
So based on our estimates for this budget, we had $300,000 still in that reserve, so that would come out of that $300,000.
And we're still tracking around $500,000 a year from the federal government, correct?
Yes, and I think we have 1 more year, and then the contract has to be renewed, so we'll wait and hear what the updates are on the renewal.
Yeah, and all the dialogue, I don't know if it came up at FCM, but all the dialogue is that the federal government is looking still at the gas tax fund to flow more money more directly to municipalities. So there's kind of upward pressure from municipalities to get that. And we've had it doubled twice in the term of the current government as well. Okay. Councillor, other questions or comments? Okay, I just want to make a pitch. Coordinator Blair talked to it here. I know there's already an event that they intend to hold in August at the bike park for the 2 downhill tracks. And I've had some conversations with some folks because there's a spillover where if that window works, it'll be, I think, the 3rd weekend in August is what they're looking at. If that window works, it's quite conceivable that we could become quite a destination in that window using both the skate park and the bike park, as well as the pump park and our other trails for a pretty spectacular event here that would be an annual type event. So bumping this up from the beginner to that intermediate advanced really does open, as the report indicates. But the other thing that's happened this year, I don't know if other people have had an opportunity to chat with some of the folks. Because of the late spring, we've had a lot of people from the north coming down to ride our trails, because our trails opened early, especially Wonderland. The drainage system on Wonderland and the way it faces, those trails are open really early. And I've actually chatted with some of the families that have come down from Prince George, and one of the families I talked to in particular said, you know what, we both have jobs that it doesn't matter where we live, and we're saying, why the heck are we driving down to Quesnel every weekend? Why don't we just move down, right? So that idea of if you build it, they will come is certainly working out. And then on the weekend, I was up at Dragon Mountain, and there was a group from Vanderhoof up in Dragon Mountain that were there, because their trails haven't been improved for quite some time, and there's still lots of snow on the trails that they've got. So just anecdotally, it's really playing the way we had hoped it to. So doing something like this to add value to it is phenomenal. And then I believe Director Norburn today, I think the bikes were all getting tuned up, etc., for the rental component at the rec center as well. Correct? Great. Okay, so on the motion, all those in favor? Any opposed? That motion passed unanimously. Okay, council information package. No items were brought forward, and I apologize. I should have recognized. I thought you got so excited about the pickleball lighting that I thought you were with them. You're here for this item, so my apologies. So we have a correspondence item, Ms. Hartley.
We received 2 pieces of correspondence from 2 members of the community, both asking for a single-use plastic ban. Okay.
This is already received. Are any council members wishing to comment on the request? Yes. So request for us to take action. Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. These letters were educational for me, because I know that the topic came up last year with Victoria moving forward with it, but then it got kiboshed for a number of different reasons. So I honestly wasn't aware that they had okayed it in Victoria, and now there's more than 20 other communities in BC that are moving forward with this. I mean, at my place of work at BC Liquor across the province now, it's all paper bags, and we really encourage people, because 25 cents is a lot for some, even for a sleeve, that they bring their reusable bags. So I love the initiative, and I'm hoping that we can move forward after staff looks at it.
Okay, Councillor Roodenburg, you wanted to comment, and then Councillor Vic.
Thank you. So what has happened too at the provincial level is they actually changed the community charter that allowed communities to take this into their own bailiwick. So we no longer have to approach the province and say, listen, we would like you to think about this. So it gives us a little more freedom to decide whether or not we'd like to move forward. So it will be up to council how we take this and move forward, whether we do or don't.
Okay, Councillor Vic.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In principle, I would agree with a ban, especially in light of the challenges we face with our landfill, and this would certainly alleviate some pressure. Also, as what Councillor Elliott was saying, in my business, we've adapted long ago from plastic to paper. My only thought would be, obviously this affects restaurants more adversely than regular retail type operations. If we were to move down this path, I would hope that we would consult with restaurants, especially of the fast food nature, so they would have adequate time to adjust their business to accommodate such a move like this. But those are my thoughts.
Councillor Paul.
Yeah, thank you. I'm looking forward to a report coming back from staff on this. I would be in favor. However, I think I would certainly feel more comfortable if it was a provincial initiative rather than a patchwork quilt of municipal. And I'm thinking mainly for the from travelers who may come into the community and be unaware of the ban. I would also wonder about smaller single-use plastics that would be used in the produce department, the meat department, the bulk department, et cetera, and I think that should be addressed. And also, I would like to know if compostable single-use plastic bags might be exempted from this kind of a program.
Again, Councillor Paul, just to reflect on your comments, the province doesn't run our landfill, we do, and this has direct implications to us. So I think, you know, the onus is on us to look at all of our waste streams, and I'm not sure how traveler confusion even fits in to the question, because if the bags are just not being made available from our retail sector, they're just not being made available. So. City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this is actually an issue that's evolving quite rapidly. As Councillor Elliott mentioned, the province has made some changes, but the federal government's also involved in this file, and they're looking at various single-use plastics with the goal of denying the use of some of those plastics for certain uses. So maybe the best approach, rather than suggesting that we push ahead with something, would just be to bring back an informational report to council saying, here's where the province seems to be moving, here's what some of the municipalities have done, and then here's what we see the federal government is doing at the same time, rather than jumping on a bandwagon where it may be legislated for us before too long anyways. So I suggest maybe we do just a bit of a scan to start with. Thank you.
So again, we've already received the correspondence, so we would need a motion from council to that effect. And some people have referenced, you know, looking forward to seeing a staff report. I would recommend that we actually do a motion to receive a staff report along the lines that the city manager has indicated. Where are the feds going? Where is the province going? What have been the lessons learned in particular from the municipalities that have gotten ahead of the game? And I think for council, you know, what are the enforcement, compliance, you know, those kinds of issues. And I would like to see also best practices on communications with the impacted retail community too, because I think that's where the fall down came in many of the communities, where they didn't do some upfront engagement and look at some options. So, so if we can have that motion, Councillor Roodenburg, Councillor Vick, so moved, and I'll leave it up to Ms. Hartley to get all the commentary there. So Councillor Roodenburg.
So while we were talking, I also just sent an email out to everybody. It's an article from the BC Retail Council of Canada, and it gives you a really good overview of the communities in BC that did it before the government changed the community charter, and also those who've changed it since. And there's lots of links there on their bylaws and what they look like. So it's just a part of what we're talking about, but just maybe a little bit of pre-reading before we get that.
Yeah, don't read your emails right now.
No.
In council meeting. Maybe send one, but not reading one is allowed.
It was pertinent.
Okay. On the motion then to have staff bring something back to us, all those in favor? Any opposed? That motion carried unanimously. Thank you for stimulating that conversation for us. No new business, no changes to upcoming meetings, no changes to committee appointments. Any announcements or future events? I went back to director at the beginning. Councillor Goulart.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just want to mention that on June 21st is National Indigenous Peoples Day. There is an event happening at the Abed, or the Helen Dixon Center. It'll be beginning at 9. There'll be lots of entertainment, festivities, vendors, food. So come out and enjoy the day. That's June 21st, National Indigenous Peoples Day. So just want to make note of that.
Any other announcements or future events? Seeing none, gallery questions. Okay, seeing none, I would invite a motion to adjourn. Don't all jump at it. Councillor Goulet, Councillor Runge, all in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, staff.